Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show will revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Moosie Drier and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Moosie Drier, and today we're excited to have on someone who's been a Golden Globe-nominated actor. He's appeared in films with people such as Kirk Douglas and Charles Bronson. He starred in acclaimed miniseries The Bastard, its follow-up The Rebels, and the popular Hollywood Wives. He was also on Dallas, Emerald Point NAS. He's been a writer, director, and producer of many films, including the upcoming documentary about the life of his mother, Stella Stevens, The Last Starlet. Please help us welcome Andrew Stevens. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We have a lot to cover because you've done so many things in your career, and we want to talk about all of them, but let's start with the documentary, Stella Stevens, The Last Starlet. Talk about careers. I mean, so many great movies, and look at some of the people she's been in films with. I mean, Bing Crosby, Elvis, Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin, just to name a few. But I was reading that the impetus for this documentary came about because she was omitted from the Academy Awards in memoriam. It's mind-boggling to think that she was, but is that what propelled you to do it?
In a way, yes. Shortly after, I got a call from my daughter after the Oscars 2 years ago, and my mother had passed away about 2 weeks before the Oscars. And she said, Grandma wasn't on the Oscars in memoriam segment. And I said, really? And I had taped it. So I went back and watched it. And then I saw Mira Sorvino, who was apoplectic, that they'd omitted Paul Sorvino, Tom Sizemore, Anne Hesh, who just had a tragic death, Robert Blake. I mean, and I've been my mother was a lifelong Academy member. I've been an Academy member since 1973. James Stewart and Rock Hudson were my sponsors. And I wrote a letter I wrote several letters, but to the Actors Branch, the chairman, the president, and not one person of my Academy responded.
Wow.
I protested kind of silently by becoming an emeritus member and a non-voting member because I do not agree with the current iteration of the Motion Picture Academy and whatever, they sent out to all the membership a questionnaire on how are we doing with inclusivity. And I sent back my answer saying you're doing great with diversity, but you're doing a very bad job with inclusivity, because inclusivity means including everyone, not to the exclusion of people because they're middle-aged white men.
Yep.
Yeah. So when you were a youngster and your mom was this star, did you realize what was going on, or did you feel like most families are like that? People are in show business.
Well, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. And I lived predominantly with my grandparents until I was 6 years old. Then I moved to Los Angeles, lived with my mother for 6 years, then moved back to Memphis. So I spent 12 of my first 18 years in Memphis, Tennessee. I had a dichotomous cross-section of cultures, of modes of dress, ways of speaking. And I just learned at a very young age to be chameleon-like and be able to adapt and assimilate wherever I was, because kids are cruel and they make fun of other kids. So I learned to speak like a Southerner when I was in Memphis. I learned to speak differently when I was in California, dressed differently, and conducted myself differently.
Yeah, I probably sharpened your tools early as such a good actor.
Quit acting in 1993. It's kind of embarrassing that your whole intro was, 3 decades old acting accolades, but.
Well, we will not apologize, sir.
Right.
Your body of work is still amazing. I mean, What you said 93? You walked away from in front of the camera?
Yes.
And we're gonna get to like we know you've been behind the camera, producing, directing, all that. You were in Tennessee and your mom was in California. Do you feel that put a strain at the time on your relationship with your mother?
Well, our relationship was always a fractured and at times volatile one. So you know, it's my norm was living alternately with two sets of grandparents and never living with either one of my parents except for those limited 6 years with my mother, probably from first yes, from first grade through fifth or sixth grade.
Yeah.
So when you went out to visit her, like, did she take you around to her sets? Did you get to meet a lot
Oh,
of the people that you saw
I
with?
met everybody. I knew everybody. I mean,
Hmm.
I, you know, every movie star, every director, from name it, Dean Martin, Vincent Minnelli, Fred Astaire, Sinatra, the Rat Pack. I was exposed to everyone, and they were just, you know, if Steve was coming over to go on a bike ride, it was Steve McQueen. So,
Oh wow.
you know, I learned to ride a motorcycle riding behind Steve on Mulholland Drive, and learning how to decelerate going into curves and accelerate coming out of curves, and the centrifugal force rights the bike. So, but it was just my norm. And then my other norm was fishing in mud holes in Grenada, Mississippi. And, as I said earlier, I had a very dichotomous childhood.
What a cool experience for you. But when you were around your mom and her work when you were young, do you remember thinking, "Oh gosh, this is what I want to do"? Is this what maybe inspired you to get into acting or
Not at all.
no?
And I talked about it many times over the decades. I was a drummer. I played in a rock and roll band. I got a fake ID when I was 14, saying that I was a year older, because at 15 you could play in clubs in Mississippi. And we didn't have photo IDs for kids back then. It was just a birth certificate with a forged date. And at the end of my junior year in high school, I had a falling out with my music teacher, and I was walking past a classroom, and I looked in, and there was this beautiful blonde woman with tinted glasses, and I went to my friend. I said, "Who is that?" And they said, "Oh, that's Miss Hardy. She's the new speech teacher." And I said, "Dude, I'm taking a speech class." And I ran down to the guidance counseling office. I said, "You got to get me in this six period speech." And they said, "You can't. I'm sorry." I said, "What do you mean I can't?" And they said, "Well, that's an advanced acting class, and you can't take a speech class. You can't take the advanced acting class without having had some sort of requisite speech class." And I said, "No, you don't understand. I need to be in that class." And they said, "Well, there's only one person who can override the rule, and that's Miss Rogers." And I just happened to be, and Miss Rogers had been there 100 years. She had taught my father and my mother
Oh
at,
wow.
at Messick High School in Memphis, Tennessee, which is where I graduated. And I went down and kind of sweet talked Miss Rogers, and she let me, and I happened to be in her advanced placement English class. So she let me take that class. And, I was just a moony eyed kid. And I was challenged to work in community theater, to work in school theater, and then to enter into these speech and drama tournaments that took place all over the region, all over the district, all over the state. And I went reluctantly to one, and I won,
You won it.
and and won, and kept winning, kept winning, kept winning. And before the district competitions, Kathy Hardy said to me, "We're changing your material." And I said, "Oh, you can't do that. We're winning." And I was invested. I was fully invested at the time. And she said, "No, we're changing it." She said, "I want to know if it's me and you, or if it's the material that is so successful, completely changed, diametrically opposed different material, and went to the next few tournaments that were district, and we won. And we took that material to the state tournament in Nashville, and I won first place in the state of Tennessee. I was the top high school actor in the state. I won a college scholarship to go to a school in Florida called Flagler College, and went to California in the summer to visit, and went to a party with some friends, and this guy walks up to me and he says, "Ah, you're Stella's kid, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Sir?" He said, "Nobody's called me sir since Elvis Presley." And I said, "Well, I grew up in Memphis, sir." And he said, "Memphis? What were you doing in Memphis?" I said, "Living, going to school." He said, "What'd you study?" I said, "Well, I gave him a few classes, and I said, but I just won the Tennessee High School Speech and Drama state tournament. I said I was the top actor in the state." He said, "You're kidding." I said, "Yeah, but I'm going away to college. I want a scholarship." He said, "To do what?" I said, "To get my degree." He said, "In what?" I said, "Theater arts." He said, "For what?" I said, "So I can come back here and be an actor." He said, "You don't need an actor, kid. You need an agent." And I said, "Yeah. What's an agent?" And he said, "Me." And it was a man named Dick Clayton, who represented Burt Reynolds, the #1 box office star in the world, Jane Fonda, Candice Bergen, Jan Michael Vincent. He'd even represented James Dean. And he said, "If you stay here, I'll put you to work." So I blew off going away to college and stayed in Los Angeles and started working right away.
That's fantastic. Meanwhile, you pissed off somebody who studied really hard for their speech and drama tournament, and you come in on a whim and win it. That's awesome. That is so cool.
I don't get me wrong. I studied my ass off, and I worked very. It was no whim.
Right. Okay.
So
okay.
one of the people that you have in the documentary is Quentin Tarantino. So how did that happen? How did he become involved?
So my profession, unlike your intro, is that I've been a film executive and owner of my own companies, and I've produced over 200 films. And I was on the phone with a partner at William Morris Endeavor who happened to be Quentin's agent. We were talking about another director for another project. And I said, at the end of the call, I said, "Can I ask you something off topic?" He said, "Sure." I said, "You represent Quentin, right?" And he said, "I do." And I said, "Well, he just wrote very favorably about my mother in his most recent book, Cinema Speculation." I said, "There's no chance he would want to maybe be involved, maybe do an interview." He said, "Hey, you never know." He said he gets 300 requests a week. Just send an email. We'll forward it to his assistant. He'll either respond or he won't. A couple of weeks later, I get an email saying, "He's interested. What's the next step?" And I said, "Well, where is he? Is he in LA? I mean, I'll come there. I'll, bring a crew." He said, "No, he lives in Tel Aviv. He moved to Israel. He married an Israeli woman and lives in Israel." And I said, "Really?" So we set it up, went to Israel. He gave us 70 minutes of an extraordinary interview. And I couldn't have written or paid for the effusive praise that he heaps on my mother.
Now let's start talking about your career and things. So one of the first things that you got was listed as Adam 12. How did that come about for you? And like, what was that feeling after seeing your mother be in so many things that you were now on TV as well now?
I auditioned and won the role and went to work. It just was an extension of, I worked in the theater quite a bit. I won the LA Drama Critics Circle Award for a show that then went to New York. I think my only regret in the years that I was an actor is that I was offered to go to Broadway 4 times, and I could never reconcile the finance. There was no Airbnb or house swap or anything.
Right.
And I had a house payment and a car payment, and to go to New York and make $350 a week, I couldn't reconcile the finance to go do several of the shows that I was offered. But back to your original question, I I was a stage actor primarily, and just transposed that through years and years and years and years of study. I was in class morning, noon, and night. I had a mentor who was a Strasberg disciple. There was no whim. There was no, I think my mother says in an interview, she said, if I could have helped him, I would have, but he never asked for help, and I never did anything. But he did it on his own, and you have to understand at that point, it wasn't like today where Meryl Streep is working and starring in movies and TV shows at 75 years old. At 30, 35 years old, as a female, your careers were pretty much relegated to character roles after that.
Yeah.
And I don't mean this in any way disparagingly, but at the time I was successful as an actor. My mother was just an out of work actress, and I hired her in 11 or 12 movies and TV shows that I owned and produced over the years. So, and she was very appreciative of that.
One of your first roles was in Shampoo with Julie Christie, Warren Beatty, Goldie Hawn.
So I walk on the set of Shampoo. That's where my meeting / audition was to take place, and I met Hal Ashby, the director, and Warren came up, and he shook my hand. I think I probably met him when I was a kid, and when he walked up, he said, 2711732. I said, yeah. He said, because that was our phone number. He still remembered the phone number, which, obviously was Stella's phone number. It was mine also, when I was a kid. And, because there were no smartphones, so his Rolodex was in his head, particularly if you were a beautiful woman.
That I was going to say, I have a feeling he had a knack for remembering pretty women's phone numbers. Yep.
Exactly.
I want to ask about the Oregon Trail that you did with Rod Taylor. So what were your experiences on that? Because you had been in so many roles already, but now you're one of the leads.
The Oregon Trail, we shot it in Flagstaff, Arizona. We had done a 2-hour pilot, over a year before they picked up the series, and the series did not get picked up. We had a significantly different cast, and almost a year later, somehow NBC went to the upfronts and they sold the pilot, but everybody's series contracts. Obviously, Rod Taylor wanted to do the show because he was the patriarch, and I was under contract to Universal Studios at the time, so they compelled me to do the series. I wasn't in favor of doing it because I was I was trying to be a film actor at the time, and I got shoehorned into the series. And then an offer for Brian De Palma's The Fury came up, and the studio was going to turn it down. And I had to go beg and plead and literally cry and grovel to Frank Price, who was the head of Universal Studios at the time, to try and work out the schedule so that I could do both. And they figured it out. They negotiated a fee from Fox. Fox paid Universal probably double my salary for 2 years for one film over 3 months. And I was flying back and forth from Flagstaff, Arizona to Los Angeles, to Flagstaff, to Chicago, to Caesarea in Israel. And I was shooting both the series and the film simultaneously.
The Boys and Company C.
Right.
You worked with Arlie Ermy. So what was that like working on that film and with him?
Sidney J. Furie was a pretty acclaimed director at the time. He'd done Appaloosa with Brando, and he was looking just for the guys that he had in mind for this movie. And I remember I was skiing in Sun Valley, Idaho, and I drove at like 3 a.m. to Twin Falls, got on a plane, flew into LA, was caffeined out of my mind, went in and auditioned for this role, and I got it. And everybody in town was trying to get these 5 roles. And I went to I spent 9 weeks in the Philippines, in Manila, and all around Luzon. And it was the first film that I'd ever shot in exact sequence because it's a Vietnam movie and about these young recruits who go through boot camp and then get sent to Vietnam, and they our heads in the beginning of the movie. And one of the reasons we shot in sequence is because our hair would grow back, organically from scene to scene. We were there was another actor who was hired to play the drill sergeant, and for whatever reason, Sydney didn't love him in the role, and we met this guy who was an extra. He was an expat living in Manila, you know, probably had a bunch of kids and a bunch of wives,
Right.
and he was just crazy. And it was Arlie Ermy, and we started elevating his role. And Sydney gave him a little dialogue, and he did it. And then he did it. He actually was a more believable DI than the actor he'd hired. So he diminished the actor's role and expanded Arlie Ermy's role. And then other people saw him and thought, "Oh my gosh, he looks legit." And he did basically the same role in Full Metal Jacket. I think he was also possibly in Purple Hearts. I'm not sure. And I hired him for a movie, the very first film I directed for Roger Corman that I discovered Janusz Kaminski, who was my director of photography, and for this low budget monster movie, who won the Oscar 3.5 years later for Schindler's List. But he was in that film, and I also hired my mother. He played opposite my mother in The Terror Within 2.
I have to ask about Roger Corman then. How did you come to work for Roger Corman, with that legendary filmmaker?
Those who don't know, Roger Corman was responsible for starting the careers of James Cameron, Joe Dante, Scorsese, Jack Nicholson, Sandra Bullock, on and on and on.
I believe Ron Howard too.
Yeah, and Ron Howard.
Right.
So there was a strike. It was either a writers, directors, actors strike or something going on in Hollywood. And out of the blue, I got offered to do a movie for Roger Corman. Must not have been an actor strike, but and I thought, well, nobody's working. I'm going to do it. And it was playing opposite George Kennedy in a sort of post-apocalyptic man in a rubber suit monster movie, pre-CGI, called The Terror Within. And a year later, I got a call from Roger saying, "I'd like to speak to you." So I went to his office, and I thought, Roger Corman wanted to speak to me. And he said, "I don't know if you know, but The Terror Within did quite well." And I said, "I had no idea." And he said, "Very well. I'd like to offer you the same deal I gave Ron Howard." "I'm in. What is it?" And he said, "If you'll appear in the sequel for the same price you did the first film, I'll allow you to also write it and direct it." So not only did I make less money because I did 3 jobs, that's classic Roger Corman, squeeze a dime, but I wrote the script, and I got to direct my first film, and he knew that I was aspiring to direct and to write.
How was he? How was he personally working with
Roger? He wrote the foreword of the first book I wrote on producing and filmmaking. There are 2 publications out there: Foolproof Filmmaking and Producing for Profit. And Roger and I did 26 films together in various capacities over the years. I often served as a foreign distributor for some of his films because I was able to get more money out of the international market than he was. And he also bought a number of my productions for his domestic home video company.
I want to ask about one of the miniseries, because it's one a huge thing for you, which was The Bastard, and one of our friends was in it. I don't think you shot any scenes, but Ike Eisenman, one of our friends, was in that as well. So what was it about that? How did you get involved in that series? Tell us something about it. And did you have to do how much training for fencing did you have to do?
Well, again, I was under contract to Universal Studios at the time, and I had to go in and read for the role. Lee Katzin was the director, and I had done a small role in a TV movie called The Last Survivors. It was essentially a television remake of the movie Lifeboat, with Martin Sheen and a whole fleet of stars, and I played a young ship steward named Checkerman, who was one of the first people to drown, and let go of the lifeboat and slip underwater because it was overcrowded. And the director remembered me fondly. And I auditioned and I won the role. I mean, it was a very important role because it was the titular role in a 4-hour series. And, it became so popular that Jay Leno did a skit about it. Second City did a skit about it. And, I think it was one of the first times back then, it was around 1978, that they got away with saying the word bastard on screen. And he would say it, the announcer would say it with such relish. William, Tom Bosley, Joan Blondell, Rory Calhoun, Lauren Green, Tom Bosley. He'd list about 30 stars that everyone knew from major TV and movies. And Andrew Stevens is the best. And, but at the same time, when Bastard was released, I had The Boys in Company C in theaters and also The Fury in theaters. So it was kind of this trifecta of all of a sudden I was out there in the public consciousness, and I was nominated for a Golden Globe for Boys in Company C. They didn't televise it that year, but I think I have a program somewhere.
So what about the Hollywood wives? Candice Bergen and Angie Dickinson and Anthony Hopkins, Roddy McDowall. God, I loved Roddy McDowall. And you worked with all these people.
Rod Steiger, Stephanie Powers, Steve Forrest, and I'm probably leaving out half an hour more. But it was a huge cast. Jackie Collins, who became a dear friend, was she was very involved in the development of the book to a miniseries. And, it was kind of inside Hollywood, scandalous at the time. And she didn't want me in the role. And I kept trying to get in. And she said, nope, don't see it, because the role of Buddy Hudson was the aspiring young actor who also had an evil twin. So it was a dual role of very diverse characters. And so finally, in the script and in the novel, the aspiring actor, he does almost an Angeline type thing. He takes a photo with his shirt off, with his jeans kind of unbuttoned, and he puts up a billboard, and it says, "Who is Buddy Hudson?" And I'd just done a photo shoot, and I said, "Shoot this shot." And I blew it up to a poster size, put "Who is Buddy Hudson" on it, and I sent it to Jackie Collins. And they called me in, and I got the role.
Andrew, I have to ask about this because I don't know how many interviews ask you about this, but I do, because this was.
I don't do a lot of it at all.
Okay, so. This is required viewing. This was required viewing in my household growing up. Okay, you competed on Battle of the Network Stars. We've had on other people who also competed, and just about everyone said that everyone came on just looking to have fun, but once the competition started, everyone changed and said it got really serious. What was your experience with that?
I did it twice. I did it once for ABC when I was doing Code Red, the series, and once for CBS when I was doing Emerald Point NAS. And on the ABC show, it was me, Scott Baio, and Sam Jones. And Scott's dad fancied himself the coach, and we kept racing to see who was the fastest, and we all tied. And so I remember in the football segment, Scott was a quarterback, I was a receiver. I scored over, I can't remember who it was, Bruce Boxleitner or someone. And, Howard Cosell was calling the events, which was really fun. Mr. T was there. We became friendly. Kind of the most disconcerting thing is when you get to the show, they give you your costume for the weekend. And it was a warm-up jacket with your network colors and logos, a pair of dolphin shorts, a tank top, and a Speedo. Now, there are photographers everywhere. You're doing your job promoting your series for your network. And there was no internet at the time. And all of a sudden now, everywhere I go, people have found a shot of like me or me and Sam Jones in a Speedo, and they zoom in on your package.
Yeah.
It was not part of the deal, trust me, at the time.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's go on to producing.
But
You got
Battle of the Network Stars replays on ESPN Classic Sports.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
And many are on YouTube that you could still watch.
yeah. Probably at Pepper. I think they shot that at Pepperdine.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so you go into producing, right? And it's in the 90s. What got you behind the camera?
Well, I was trying to move away from the camera, going back to the late '80s, and the trick was I still had to pay the rent, and out of the blue, I got offered this 2-year contract role on what I felt was throwing in the towel with my acting career. It was a series called Dallas. And, I'd always done my own shows. And I thought, well, I'm quitting anyway. And this would be the kiss of death to get on somebody else's show where I'm, a satellite character at best, because, they had 30 plus characters that with revolving storylines. And I will say I don't do a lot of interviews because I don't, my acting career is ancient history to me. But for the first time, I got talked into by a couple of friends about 2 months ago of doing a Dallas event in Dallas called the South Fork Experience. And it was a weekend event with Patrick and Linda and Charlene and Cherie and Morgan Fairchild was there. And I'd never done one. And I thought, oh, God, I don't know how I got talked into this. And I showed up and it was lovely.
I bet it was.
From all over the world. It was like being in a fraternity that has fewer and fewer members every year. And it was wonderful. And I'm so surprised to say that, and I'd probably do it again because it was so great seeing everyone.
Well, yeah.
It was just a well-run event, and such support and love from these people that watch 14 seasons every year of the show and know things that I've long forgotten. So,
right.
So I don't mean to disparage it at all. I actually am, in retrospect, am quite thankful for having done it. But I had started, as I recounted with the Roger Corman story, somewhere around 89, 90, writing and producing my own movies. And I wrote and starred in some independent films, and I started studying the independent market. And I realized that I still, well, not still, at the time I had kind of a large cachet in the independent film market, and that 2/3 of those revenues came from outside the US and Canada. So I started traveling internationally to the markets, learning the markets. And when I did The Terror Within 2 with the Ron Howard deal, I said to Roger Corman, I said, I want a second picture. I said, I know you're doing co-production deals. I'll take foreign, you take domestic. And I ended up producing a little movie for him called Body Chemistry 3, which on his $300,000 investment. So I ended up owning foreign rights free and clear. And Roger did so well with it. He said, let's do 3 more. So all of a sudden, I owned foreign rights free and clear on 4 movies. And I started a foreign sales and production company. I partnered with somebody else that had a 4-picture commitment, did 19 films in 10 months, 7 in-house productions, and I acquired 12. I sold out of that, and I started a company called Royal Oaks Entertainment, and I did 70 films in 3 years, produced and developed and financed 56, and still directed 1 film a year back then. And then I flipped out of that company and went into the bigger business and started a company called Franchise Pictures, and was with one partner the largest independent film company in the business, with a theatrical output deal through Warner Brothers. I created personally a classics division for art house films with major movie stars, and then I kept the sort of straight to video business with Steven Seagals and Wesley Snipes and Dolph Lundgren's going. And those were sort of cash cows because we had over $1 billion worth of loans with Comerica Bank for single picture financing of movies, and they started cross collateralizing slates to mitigate their risk because we had so many movies outstanding with loans, and so the smaller movies actually paid the overhead.
Andrew, before we bring this home, got to ask you, do you ever get a glimpse of that desire to go back to acting in addition to your producing?
I you know I had sort of fallen out of love with acting, and I was if you called me an actor in a bar, we were going to fight. But I've softened over the years, and quitting acting is kind of a white lie because uh, I've put myself in one movie a year for and now I've just got 2 more years till my daughter's term out, that I have to earn insurance for them. But you know, I've acted one day a year for a lot of years for insurance purposes, legitimately so, because you got to do the work. You have to be of a stature to be able to pay yourself, a certain amount.
Yep.
And and I've sort of kept my hand in that way. Occasionally, I've worked for a couple of other people as as a hoot, but the older I get and the tougher the business gets, particularly for independents, with the advent of the streamers and the imperialistic monopolies of the 7 conglomerates that own the world. With no, back in the late 40s, early 50s, federal government deregulated studios from owning cinemas. Now, major conglomerates own every media outlet imaginable, cannibalized by 7 of them. And there's no deregulation from the government. There's no mandate for independence. It's like in any other business, the government allowing small business to be just stamped out. So as it gets tougher, I look at the actor thinking, all I got to do is show up and have somebody bring them a coffee and feed them a meal and give them some clothes to wear and pamper them and fluff them and say a few words and go back and sit in the air conditioning. It doesn't sound all that bad now.
Not a lot of heavy lifting, yeah.
Now, I mean, I'm in 112-degree heat, standing on concrete, sweating my balls off, and and the whole acting thing doesn't look as bad as it used to.
Yeah.
Wrap up back with the documentary again. It's again Stella Stevens, The Last Starlet. Where and when can people see it?
So we have a premiere. It's actually not a premiere. It's a limited theatrical release for a paying audience on September 30th in Los Angeles, followed by an October 3rd release on multiple platforms. It's available right now for pre-order on Apple, and all the Comcast cable networks, basically all the pay-per-view and pay-to-rent networks. And once those windows play out, and there are multiple of them, then it'll trickle down for offer to the SVOD channels like Hulu, Netflix, etc. And once those play out, then it'll trickle down to the Hulus and Plutos and the advertised supported VOD. So it's exciting. I didn't I didn't make it for financial gain, but I think we'll do well.
Oh, talk about a project from the heart. I mean, and I can't wait to see it. And I genuinely mean that. I mean, I was
Awesome.
organically a fan of your mother's and you. But And break every limb on this. I hope it gets in front of a lot of eyes.
Yeah, that's my only hope, and I think it certainly deserves to be told. Having Tarantino in it doesn't help.
I mean, it doesn't hurt.
Doesn't hurt, and uh, you know, and he is significantly in the film. There's others like Leonard Maltin, Vivica A. Fox, Barbara Luna, who had worked with Stella a couple of times, Ken Schreiner from General Hospital.
Mhm.
So there's some recognizable faces and authorities in the movie.
Awesome. One last question from me. Hey, I almost don't want to ask because I don't want to feel sad in any way, but did your mother ever express any resentment for perhaps that she didn't get her due, the recognition she was due?
I think more so that she wasn't taken seriously as a potential director because she was a woman. And the film, uh, aside from Stella's career, much more so deals with her struggle against the male-dominated, misogynistic industry of the last years of the golden age of Hollywood. And also, she was very outspoken against racism, coming from a small town in Mississippi, and certainly a racist community. And she was an advocate, certainly for women's rights and human rights.
Yeah.
And so I think she did a lot of good for a lot of people, and she's not known for it. But I think the documentary has information that I think will resonate with a lot of people.
Wow.
And
Outstanding woman. Really.
yeah, and just this is the question that most people like make sure that I ask: how can people follow you on social media or the film?
Um, I Freestyle Digital Media, which is the distributor. It's owned by uh, Byron Allen, one of his
Oh,
you know,
Many.
my now mogul friend that I knew 100 years ago, Byron Allen, is now a gigantic media mogul, and I'm sure Freestyle has a website. I'm on Twitter, the real Andrew Stevens. I don't really do Facebook. I'm not a big social media guy. I'm not sure how much I believe in it, but
Yeah.
I'm there.
well, Andrew, we want to thank you again. Like I said, I grew up a big fan, and it's such a pleasure getting to talk to you, hearing your stories. And I want to thank you again for coming on. We both thank you.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Break a leg
We'll
on that
sign us
top.
out here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen with Moosie Drier. And again, a very special thanks to Andrew Stevens. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thank you for tuning in to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast. Listening to this podcast just makes you really cool.